This week's Kamala story is pretty amusing. An aide to Senator Kamala Harris blasted the treatment of staff on the California Democrats' presidential campaign in the resignation letter this month. This is my third presidential campaign, and I have never seen an organization treat its staff so poorly, wrote State Operations Director Kelly Meilenbacher or Backer in the November 11th letter, which was obtained by the New York Times. While I still believe that Senator Harris is the strongest candidate to win the general election in 2020, I no longer have confidence in our campaign or its leadership, she added. She wrote that the treatment of our staff over the last 2 weeks was the final straw in this very difficult decision. It is not acceptable to me that we encourage people to move from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore only to lay them off with no notice, with no plan for the campaign, and without thoughtful consideration of the personal consequences to them or the consequences that their absence would have on the remaining staff. Mellenbacher said it her letter. Okay, so the Hill is having another grammatical error. It's supposed to be Mellenbacher said in her letter. They put said it her letter. It's unacceptable that we would lay off anyone that we hired only weeks earlier. It is unacceptable that with less than 90 days until Iowa, we still do not have a real plan to win. Our campaign for the people is made up of diverse talent, which is being squandered by indecision and a lack of leaders who will lead, she continued. Mellenbacher's resignation becomes effective today. Meanwhile, Representative Marcia Fudge, who has endorsed Harris, criticized some top aides and called for the firing of campaign manager Juan Rodriguez in an interview with the Times. I have told her there needs to be a change. Fudge said the weakness is at the top, and it's clearly Juan. He needs to take responsibility. That's where the buck stops. The newspaper noted that Harris declined to be interviewed. Oh man, this is great. You know, I like this story not because I am happy that she fired all these people in Baltimore, telling them to move, but because we so rarely get to hear about the personal effect of failing campaigns on people besides the candidate. For example, I remember when Perry ran against Trump in the previous presidential election. He was the first person to get out. His staff was having to take pay cuts. They started doing it for, volunteer work, and it still wasn't enough. And people had to make sacrifices for a campaign that no one's going to remember. No one's going to, got nowhere. Didn't win a single state. Barely were in any of the debates. It was a complete failure. And it sucks because a lot of times you have people work on these things who genuinely believe in this person's message. And while you might have some who are effective at organizing, relaying a message, coercing people into thinking the candidate's a good person or good or qualified for the position, you'll have those at the top, like her campaign manager, who this congresswoman is saying get rid of Fudge, that aren't effective and I guess it's hard for me to outright say he's just garbage, get rid of him, because I don't know much about his tenure. I don't think I've ever knowingly seen him. These campaign managers, other than Sanders one, how you pronounce his last name, Shakir, I haven't really seen any of these people's top person on the campaign manager. I'd actually be inclined to forget that they even have one in a lot of cases. But it sucks that those staff members had to go through with this, and it's really disturbing that we're less than 3 months away, and they don't know what they're going to do to win the first state. So why are you even in the race? But whatever. It's a nice little insight, and I think we should get these more often, where people just describe what happens behind the scenes.
11 months ago, at the launch of our campaign in Oakland, I told you all that I am not perfect, but I will always speak with decency and moral clarity and treat all people with dignity and respect, that I will lead with integrity and I will speak the truth. And so that's what I've tried to do every day of this campaign, and here's the truth today. I've taken stock and I've looked at this from every angle. And over the last few days, I have come to one of the hardest decisions of my life. So here's the deal, guys. My campaign for president simply does not have the financial resources to continue and the financial resources we need to continue. I'm not a billionaire. I can't fund my own campaign. And as the campaign has gone on, it has become harder and harder to raise the money we need to compete. In good faith, I cannot tell you, my supporters and volunteers, that I have a path forward if I don't believe I do. So, to you, my supporters, my dear supporters, it is with deep regret, but also with deep gratitude, that I am suspending our campaign today. But I want to be clear with you. I am still very much in this fight, and I will keep fighting every day for what this campaign has been about. Justice for the people, all the people. Our campaign has been about fighting for people whose voices have not been heard or are too often ignored, and we will keep up that fight. Let's remember, we were the first to put the injustice of inadequate teacher pay on the national agenda, and we will certainly keep up that fight. We were the first to demand justice for our children, declaring we would take bold executive actions to stop gun violence. We will keep up that fight. We were the first to demand justice for women with a plan to block unconstitutional state abortion laws. We will keep up that fight. And our campaign uniquely spoke to the experiences of Black women and people of color and their importance to the success and the future of this party. Our campaign demanded no one should be taken for granted by any political party. We will keep up that fight because no one should be made to fight alone. And I believe our campaign showed every child in America, regardless of their color or gender, that there are no limits to who can lead and hold positions of power in our country. In that way, this campaign has been so much bigger than me. So I'm extremely grateful to the hundreds of staff who have moved and uprooted your lives and sacrificed time away from your families. I know our fight has been personal for each one of you, and I could not have done this without my husband, Doug, and my entire family and friends who gave up so much to embark on this journey with me and have supported me every step of the way. And I am grateful to the thousands of volunteers and contributors who have chipped in, who have knocked on doors, who have made calls, and who have put their faith and trust in me. It has been the honor of my life to be your candidate. And I want to be clear, although I am no longer running for president, I will do everything in my power to defeat Donald Trump and fight for the future of our country and the best of who we are. And I know you will too. So let's do that together. Let's keep fighting for the America we believe in, an America free of injustice, an America that we know can be unburdened by what has been. Thank you, guys.
All right, it's taken me a couple of days to respond to Harris dropping out because I wanted to collect my thoughts. I wanted to speak on this in some intellectual manner that I might not have been able to the day that it happened, and express a little bit of frustration because the new formula I have for content is to record everything I put out, uploads on Saturday, which means throughout the week, anything that is not a stream was recorded the previous Saturday. So when I recorded the Harris Campaign Implodes segment that you saw earlier at the end of this upload, it's literally something that I recorded this past Saturday, and then 3 days later she gets out of the race. I had one person who was saying the reason that her campaign failed is because she kept badgering Trump. That's a comment they've tried to make, and I continue to state that the second debate with Gabbard mentioning her past record was the ultimate nail in the coffin, or really where things turned for the worse. And I explained that the reason that I say that is because Democratic voters in general. They're low information. They don't concern themselves with the past of these candidates. They don't look up what they've done. And a lot of people, when she launched back in January, they thought she was this progressive attorney who had risen to become a senator. And, she admittedly, as a senator, actually has staked out progressive positions. Her voting record in the Senate is very similar to Sanders. Now, before anyone tries to correct me on that, let me just say that was a point that people made about Clinton as well, that her record in the Senate was similar to Sanders' record. Of course, people who actually uh, believe their differences and can see their differences in their public statements, and just whether they stick to an issue or flip flop, that we're able to easily discern that the voting record is only half of it. The other half is if the person's career conflicts with what they claim they support. So when Gabbard gets up there and mentions the people she kept in prison for cheap labor from my state, our shared state of California, referring to myself and Harris, people had no idea about that. Especially, you have to remember, debates are watched by millions, and little regular crappy campaign speeches, maybe a few thousand that are not. If we were to count people who were not attending the event and there physically. So it was the ultimate opportunity to reveal her background to the rest of the U.S., and she did. And I've tried to insist that if you look at her campaign, which went on for 11 months, from January to December, a few days ago, uh, it if you actually look at when she was polling the highest, that period was only for about a month. A lot of people have highlighted, oh my God, she was one of the winners of the first Democratic debate back in June because she confronted Biden over the comment that he made, or rather about the segregationist work that he did with Eastland and Talmadge. Yeah, she's such a progressive. She's gonna change the U.S. Yeah, people thought that from seeing that performance, not from knowing anything about her past. So she shot up and got this big boost just to go down at the end of the following month because a congresswoman that has been getting smeared left and right all year long, and before that actually, but even more so because she's running for president, uh, made mention very quickly of various actions rather that Harris has had as Attorney General. But I've tried to say before that Harris was the preferred candidate for the Democratic establishment when the race started. I mentioned her going to Martha's Vineyard a couple months after she became a senator. I've made reference to these things because I've tried to insist that many of the people in this race who are not Sanders or Warren or Gabbard or Yang are there simply to serve whoever the big wigs in the party are. And people don't like to believe that because it basically eliminates the idea that you have 15 options. Instead, you really have about five. You have those four candidates, and then you have the fifth option, which is whoever the people who claim to run the DNC, like the chairman, like the former president, like the former vice president, have supported or will throw their backing behind. So when she decided to exit, it was more having to do with finances and the wells basically drying up because the kind of quasi progressive moderate thing that she was attempting to go for after she rekindled her support for single payer, oh, I have my own version that people can get into after 10 years. That was now filled by Buddha trash. She can't play a straight moderate because that's filled by Biden and the snowman from Minnesota. So there was nowhere else for her to go. And with the finances being tied to the mayor, no cash to expend. Uh, so I think she'll run again, for 8 years, depending on if the election, who it's won by. But a lot of the establishment are now saying, "Oh my God, Democrats are racist. They got rid of the one black lady that was running, and they have a whole white face." Like, no, no, no. The voters are the ones who pick these people. Um, and I'm sorry, but if you're gonna have a field where two of the all the candidates with grassroots support out of that group are either a woman or some minority. The only one who's not is Sanders. That's it. Everybody else that actually has grassroots support, Gabbard, Yang, it's either a chick or someone who's a minority or both. But they're trying to make it seem as, and they do this thing anytime some candidate loses that is considered part of a group that's underrepresented in politics. So I've been watching all these little segments. I think Buttigieg can't win because he's homosexual. It's not like 60% of the Democrats support gay marriage. There's no way. I can't. I would love if he's just on an unrelated note. I would love if he stayed in until Wisconsin, and they're like those sexist Democrats with their gay senator, because of in reference to Baldwin, who I actually think is a much better politician slash just her positions are they're a lot more trustworthy than most of the Democrats. But yeah, I hope that this has taught people a lesson. We can't have candidates that nobody knows anything about. And it's really pathetic that it took this long to get her out of the race. But it's even worse when I think about the options that are still there. Booker is still in, for example. He should get out. I've already talked about why Biden is such a waste of space, but at least polling well. Again, due to high name recognition. He's kind of got something similar to Trump and Clinton, where he'd been famous for 30 years. So in conclusion, I think this whole quick dropout was due to funding and low numbers. And she said, why stay in for the next debate if I'm going to lose anyway? And Gabbard was the initiator of all. So I've seen some people give Gabbard credit for her campaign getting destroyed. She deserves all the credit in the world. Well, that good old progressive took out that establishment character. So thank you.